Hello. So it's a great pleasure to be here in Helsinki. Today I'm going to be talking about Drupal 8 for real, and I'll get into what that means in just a couple seconds. Quick presentation. Hello, my name is Florian Lóretan. I'm from Wunderkraut, not the Wunderkraut that's 15 minutes away on foot. I'm from Wunderkraut, Germany. So it's first time really spending time here in Helsinki, a great city. Pleasure to be here. So little slide, this is not really for a promotional slide, it's more for the context. So at Wunderkraut, we've actually made quite an impact building websites, big sites, a lot of sites, but at the moment, all of them are based on Drupal 7. And what's coming up is Drupal 8. And what I'd like to look at in this presentation is where is Drupal 8 now? Where does Drupal 8 need to be until we can use it in the same way that we currently use Drupal 7? Meaning in production, meaning real big websites that actually have an impact, not as software, but really have an impact in real people, in real life. In today's presentation, in the keynote, in the introduction, we learned that Drupal 8 is awesome. And so who here has been trying out things with Drupal 8 or has been a little bit informed? Okay, so a couple people. So this is going to be repeating some of what you saw this morning, but we have configuration management, which means that we are not going to need features anymore. It's going to be really easy to create multilingual websites that are not going to have so much overhead. We're going to have real web services that don't load the theme layer that's not needed. We have a lot of things that are configurable, like the form modes, display modes, all kind of really cool stuff that we're going to have. It means that for basic things, we're not going to need like hook form alter for everything. So this is going to be great. Couple more. We have WYSIWYG in core. And the question that everybody is asking is, when is this going to be ready? When can I start? There's many answers to that. One of the official answers was August 2013. No, not really. It didn't happen like that. And our answer that's kind of in the other direction is, now. You can use Drupal 8 in production now. There's actually many people who do. Most of them are Drupal developers. And the battery here is dying, apparently. Okay, good. I'm going to continue like that. Most of them are Drupal developers. We have a lot of websites that look like this. This is great. But for all we know, this could be a Drupal 4.7 website with a backported theme, and we wouldn't be able to tell the difference. The only way you can tell is looking at the changelog file that's in a different location. But even then, is it really using? Are these websites really using all the potential, all the hype that there is around Drupal 8? And these are not only small personal blogs. There's also bigger companies like Sensiolabs that launch real websites that are non-trivial websites on Drupal 8. There's actually a couple Drupal shops that did something similar for their own company page. But again, this is something that's a little bit more advanced, but it's not yet a fully, it's not a client site. It's people who built this website for themselves. And as I was looking for people who use Drupal 8 in production today, I found something that's really surprising. I found that Symfony developers use Drupal 8 in production a lot more than Drupal developers. And when we start thinking of why is that, we realize that for Symfony people, they're used to code, and everything that's in Drupal is something that's totally new. So hey, you get content types where you get to add fields. You can create views of content, listings of content through the interface, and they find this is fantastic. But what they're missing is, well, they don't know all the goodness, all the experience that we have with Drupal. So they don't know what they're missing. And they also have not been exposed to all the best practices that have been developed over the years in the Drupal community. Things like code-driven development, for example. So this question, when is it going to be ready? I think this is not the right question. The right question is really what? What can we do with Drupal? And in terms of Drupal, this question, what, it really comes down to contrib. If we take a look at the most used Drupal contrib modules, we see that, well, there's a big list. It's on the Drupal.org website, but it doesn't really tell us much. So I decided to take a look at each of these and see what's the status there, what is happening. So I created this diagram that is using, the size represents the usage. So we see there's big modules like views and path auto that are quite in the middle, and then the smaller ones are still pretty widely used, but they're something that we might not find on every single website. So the colors here, the dark blue ones, these are modules that are now in core. So we see that there's actually a good part of what used to be in contrib for Drupal 7, which is now really in core in Drupal 8. So that's some fantastic work. It also means that with Drupal 8, it would actually be possible to launch a real website without using any contrib modules, which is something that would be unthinkable with Drupal 7. But then we see a lot of other colors. So the light blue ones are the ones that are in contrib, meaning that if you do drush DL, the name of the module, you would get something. It's not necessarily stable, but there's already code. And then the orange ones are, well, there's some code somewhere, maybe on GitHub, maybe there's a patch, something. And then the red ones is, well, there's just nothing. There's maybe an issue that says, hey, has anybody thought of porting this module to Drupal 8? But there's nothing tangible yet. And then finally, green is the themes, and purple, these are modules that are obsolete. These are things you should never have installed in the first place if you knew what you were doing. I thought this is quite interesting. We see there's a good amount of stuff that have been done. There's also a lot more to do, but it doesn't really give us a good overview of, well, what can we do really? So I tried to look at how are we doing in certain certain types of functionality. And an important functionality when building Drupal websites is creating the content structure. This is one of the great strengths of Drupal, something that started many years ago with CCK that then became the field API. If you look at views, it is also a way of creating structures, because when you're creating a list, it's not only individual elements, but the list itself also has some semantic value. So if you look at the way that this kind of functionality was built in Drupal 7, so we had core that was already doing some things with, well, fields in core, all that. We also had contrib that was doing quite a bit, views, and so on, more field modules. And then there's also some cases where you need to write custom code. You need a custom field type. You always need a little bit of custom code at some point. How is this going to change with Drupal 8? Well, now we have a lot more in core, a lot more field types. We also have views in core. So actually, Drupal core takes care of most of these, most of the needs that we need, that we have in terms of content structure. We will still need a couple contrib modules, for example, address field, geo field, maybe media, video, something like that, things that are not in core, and of course a little bit of contrib modules. So this is actually quite nice. We see that there's some stabilization of the ecosystem, more in core, more key components. If we take a look at how this is for a different part of the functionality, how we display things. Well, in core, there were some things for Drupal 7, so you can configure the fields. It's a little bit limited, but you can get some basic stuff done. You also have the blocks, which are very limited, but it works. And then in contrib, for Drupal 7, this is where we have everything that makes Drupal great. We have panels, we have display suite, all the things that really give you the entire flexibility that you need to have in the display. And also, as usual, some custom code, maybe custom panel layouts, custom themes, all these things that really decide how this is going to look. And now taking a look at Drupal 8. Well, we have a lot more that we can do out of the box with Drupal core. So the fields are more configurable. There are less edge cases of things that are, well, almost like, behaves like a field, but is not really a field. So we can do a lot more with core. The block API, well, the block module is also more powerful. And, well, with contrib, we can do quite a few things. Well, can we really? What is there in Drupal? Well, in contrib for Drupal 8, panels. Panels is not there, and there really, well, it looks like a hopeless situation to port panels to Drupal 8 because it's so much work. Display suite, it's getting there, but it's also only a part of the solution. So how are we going to look at it to do that? And the question is, maybe it looks like this, and maybe it looks like this. Because if we don't have panels, if we don't have all these key modules that we're used to for Drupal 7, well, either we wait and wait and wait until they're ready, or maybe we'll have to go back to just putting the layout in the theme, using blocks to place all of these. This is kind of a step backward, but maybe this is the kind of development that is going to need to happen. So there's some questions here, and I think that this layout and display question is really something that we need to figure out, and it's still undecided how things will develop in the future, how the best practices will develop. So just to give you an idea of the amount of work that is needed for all of these key modules, I know lines of code per module, this is not an absolute measure of the amount of work that went into a module, but it's a rough approximate. So if you look at views is something that's huge, and it was a huge effort to put this into core, and I think that the entire team of people that worked on that, they did really a fantastic job. Then we also have CTools, which is another monster. And a lot of what was into CTools was actually used for views. So if you could actually combine those two together in a way. But then there's things like panels, and panels was actually also using a lot of what we have in CTools. And so if we compare these with some of the other top modules like token and path auto, you know, this is a huge difference. Token and path auto, they may not be stable yet, but it's something that if a few people sit down together over a weekend, they could actually just upgrade the module, and it would be pretty trivial. With something like panels, this is really a bigger problem. This is not something that one person alone can manage, and it really takes an initiative. It really takes a team of people working together, really having a clear goal. Another one, web form. Who here has used web form on a website? Okay, yeah. So if web form is not ready, what are we going to do? So there's some big essential modules that, well, if they're not there, we'll have to find solutions. We'll have to find maybe alternatives. So what can we do? What can we build with Drupal. Here's a gross generalization. So the simplest kind of website that you can build is, well, a personal website. You get to define the requirement, you build it for yourself, and if something doesn't work, if it's too difficult, well, you just don't do it. Then there's brochure websites. So let's say you build a website for a company. So you can tell them exactly how to maintain their site. If something is going to be, need some manual work, then that's fine. Path editor is not ready, just enter the path aliases yourself. It's something that could be done. Then there's what I call media websites, so larger websites where you have people who work on maintaining the content, and this is their job. So they spend their days just working with the website that is being built. And in this case, if something doesn't work well, you're really wasting people's time. This is something that could be very expensive. So you really need an additional level of, well, smoothness and of optimization in the user interface. Next, we have community websites. And the difference between what I call media websites and community websites is that the people who are creating the content, who are interacting with the website, they're not people that are employed anymore. So if something doesn't work, they're just going to leave. And you cannot tell them, okay, well, just deal with it. So community websites really bring another level in terms of, well, how stable everything needs to be, how smooth the interface needs to be. And then there's commerce website where you even ask people to give you money for something, which is a whole new level. So where are we now, today, in terms of what we can do with Drupal 8? My estimate is that we're about here. Based on the example that I showed, yeah, we have many personal websites. We have a few brochure websites for those who are adventurous, but this is by no means saying that we would be able to build any kind of brochure website with Drupal 8. And I think, well, I mean, it's great that we can already build something, but at the same time, if you think of the websites that really make an impact, the website that you're proud of, saying, hey, they're using Drupal, I'm using Drupal. It's like, you know, the White House, like the big media websites, the website that people know about, and all of them are in this part. So we really want to get to the point where we can build this kind of website to really bring Drupal 8 to an established point where it really has the impact that we have currently with Drupal 7 and that we've had for the past years. One thing that I think is also important when we're thinking about Contrib and Drupal 8, well, there's a lot of things to be upgraded, migrated. But we should also see this as an opportunity. So moving to Drupal 8, it's like moving into a new apartment. There's nothing. And you get to choose what you take with you. And so Contrib, at the moment, it looks something like this. We're very proud of having over 30,000 modules. Is this a good thing? Should we really be proud of that? In a way, yes, and in a way, absolutely no. And I think it's important that we see this move to a new version of Drupal as an opportunity to leave some stuff behind, to really focus on the things that we really need. So if you have a module that you're maintaining for Drupal 7, that's great. Before you just blindly port it to Drupal 8, maybe ask yourself, okay, well, why are we doing this? What is the purpose? Are there better ways to do this? And we need to leave some stuff behind because it's going to lead to a much cleaner ecosystem of modules and functionality. Another trend that we have at the, well, a way of building websites that we have with Drupal 7 is that we start with Drupal core. And then we add custom, well, contrib modules. We also add maybe a custom theme, custom modules. And so it's, well, these are all Drupal-specific components. And yeah, that's the way we build Drupal websites. And something that's been kind of emerging, and I think we're going to see this a lot more, especially with Drupal 8, is that we start with Drupal core, maybe a couple country modules, and then all the interesting part, the interaction, the layout, the design, well, maybe it's going to be done by other kinds of libraries that are not Drupal specific, like Backbone, like Bootstrap or Angular. So we see here we have a lot of, well, we might be opening our ecosystem to new kinds of components. So this part up until now was about what kind of functionality are we going to have, but I think it's also very interesting to see how, and how are we going to work with Drupal? How is Drupal 8 going to affect the way we work? Well, for one, there's new APIs. Plugging systems, the router system is also being completely rewritten. Forms are now objects in some cases. Pretty much every single API has been rewritten. We have configuration management, configuration API, all of these things. This is great, but it really means we need to learn all of that. And how do we learn? Well, at the moment, you can look at the code. There's some documentation, but there's no official, complete documentation. And, well, when people who are new to Drupal come to Drupal, well, just read the manual. But where's the manual for Drupal 8? And when I'm talking about the manual, it's not only the documentation on Drupal.org. It's not only the comments in the code. It's really the questions on Stack Overflow. How much time is it going to take until people run into the normal issues that you run into when building a Drupal site? Because we need to have the people who run into these questions. We need to have people answer these questions. We need to get to the point where the Google has the answers to the common questions that all of us have when building Drupal websites. So I think it's something that's, well, there's a lot of work, and we need to have people who are adventurous enough to start working with Drupal 8, knowing that it's going to be painful, and knowing that, well, there's going to be some additional work to be done to get to the point where we can really, well, be familiar enough with the system, and where we can have that knowledge that kind of like spreads out through the internet. Also, some things in Drupal 8 will be different. There's things that used to work with Drupal 7, and this is the way that we've done things for a long time. No, we're not putting SQL queries in templates, but this is a real question that was asked on Drupal.org about, hey, how do I put a SQL query in a twig template? And this is the kind of thinking that you get when you had a way of solving a problem, that this is how you've always worked, and then suddenly this doesn't, well, it might not have been a great idea in the first place, but it worked. And then now we need to really, we are forced to look at new ways of doing specific tasks. And I think that this is really asking a lot of, well, it's a mental effort. This is a little bit painful because it puts us in a situation where we feel like we don't know anything. It's an uncomfortable situation. And I think it's the reason why a lot of people, a lot of companies kind of hold back on really going full in with a new version of Drupal. It's because it's uncomfortable. And I think it might make sense, but it's uncomfortable and we need to get over it. Another big point that really needs to be addressed, and this is a big issue, code-driven development. So who here is doing some code-driven development? So using features, using installation profiles. Yeah, Is there anybody here, and you don't need to raise your hand, is there anybody here who is doing professional Drupal development and who's not using code-driven development with features or configuration management, something like that? You don't need to raise your hand, but if you're not, you should really be doing this, because this is the way that, well, this is the way to do it. It's just unprofessional not to do that. And this is a best practice that has crystallized over like the past, well, 10 years of Drupal development. This is really best practice. And the problem is that we have configuration management, which is great, but it doesn't exactly let you have the same kind of processes, the same kind of workflows for team collaboration, for deployment that we are familiar with. And it's not something that is, well, that we need to change the way we think. It's just that it's not possible to say, I want to install Drupal and to take this configuration directly. It doesn't work. You cannot have an installation profile where you just do drush site install and have everything there. So this is a big limitation. And I think that the basic ideas behind configuration management are there. And they're fantastic. It's so much better than what we have in Drupal 7. But there's still some big questions that need to be answered about how do we use these tools? What are the processes? So it's not about the code. It's about how we use the code. And it's only when we use the code really in real projects when we have to find a solution, because otherwise the project will not happen. When we have to find a solution, then we run into, the smaller problems that really need to be fixed. And I think code-driven development is a great idea, but we need to really finalize the processes. We need to define the new best practices. And at the moment, they are not there. In terms of people, Drupal 8 might force us to redefine some roles. In the past, it used to be, and this is still a very common misconception, is that themers, well, they're like PHP developers who only use the print function, maybe if they're advanced. No, this is a terrible misconception. And this comes from the fact that our templating system so far was based on PHP. But as we're seeing the web evolve, there's more and more functionality that's coming to the front end. And we're now seeing that front-end developers and back-end developers, there's no hierarchy between them. It's just different kinds of technologies. And there's more and more stuff that's coming to the front-end world, and back-end developers are often a little behind on that. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the team structures for a project is going to change over time. What is going to be the interaction between different team members, and we really need to redefine many processes there. So I actually have no idea how I'm doing on time, but okay, yeah, then I think it should be good. Then, conclusion. I think that Drupal 8 is great, but it's also bringing many challenges. Difficult challenges, and, well, we have the option of keeping it safe and just keeping on working with Drupal 7. It's a little bit painful, but we know exactly how painful it is. This is something that's predictable. But for those who are also a bit adventurous, it's also full of opportunities. So to give you an example, when we started, a couple years ago, we started a small company called Wunderkraut, 4 people in Germany, and we decided, hey, we're going to focus on just building Drupal 7 sites because, well, it wasn't out there at the time, but we just stuck to it. It was a little bit painful, a little bit risky, but it actually worked out quite well, and it gave us a huge advantage being a very small company at the time, to really be able to evolve. And since then, well, the company has changed quite a bit. We didn't grow from 4 people to 150 people, just like that. A lot more things happened, but I think looking at the current ecosystem, this is a big opportunity for small companies, because small companies can really get up to speed much faster than big companies. It's a lot easier to train 3 or 4 people to learn Drupal 8 than to train bigger teams. So I think that it is an opportunity for smaller teams to really, have a great impact and really have a massive advantage. So again, it's like moving into a new territory. It really lets us redefine a lot of things. And those of us who are ready to do that can really have a big advantage. There's also going to be some compromises. For example, no panels, okay. And maybe we don't need like a stacked layout with 3 columns and 2 top sections. Well, we can use simpler layout. This is actually quite of a trend now. The responsive web has made it acceptable to have a 1-column layout on mobile devices. And what we're seeing in a lot of cases is that the statistics, the analytics show that this kind of very simple layout where you really focus on what information is essential, it works a lot better than the more complex layout that has everything. And so maybe we don't need panels after all, but it means that we need to conceive different kinds of websites. So changes, limitations can also be good things. They can really help us move towards, what is the future. Also, with this kind of change that we have, opening the ecosystem, integrating more external components, external technologies, this is great. And this is also forcing us maybe to open up our community. At a session earlier this morning, there was a question, okay, are there any WordPress or Joomla people? No. Well, why not? You could use Backbone or AngularJS with WordPress or with Joomla just as well as with Drupal. So if that's the case, shouldn't we be having more communication, more interoperability between systems? And I think what's really interesting with this is that it's not only for building a really fancy user interface for a customer project, but it could be used in Contrib as well. Think of, for example, of the panels admin interface. It's pretty complex with drag and drop stuff. Do we really need to have some stuff that's in JavaScript and then you save and it just refreshes the page and all of that? We have configuration entities, blocks or configuration entities. We have a REST API that gives us access to all entities. So we could actually build the entire admin interface of panels using Backbone.js and saving stuff just using REST services. This would be a completely different way to build module, even Contrib modules, but maybe this is the future. So we really need to think about this and to be open to new possibilities because, it might be great. If we look at the adoption of Drupal 8, there's no definite timeline there, but at the moment, we're probably here. So there's a few people using Drupal 8, but it's really not mainstream. And then it's going to rise slowly, and then at some point, it's just going to go straight up. And everybody's going to jump on it. And at some point, it's going to curve a little bit. But this is what's interesting. At the same time, the number of people using Drupal 7 for new projects is going to go down a little bit. And what's important here is that, okay, maybe here, Drupal 8 is not that ready. But this is the point where we should be getting ready to use Drupal 8, where we should be getting familiar. Because if we start when everybody else is already using Drupal 8. Well, this means that we're going to be maintaining Drupal 7 projects at the point where, well, everybody else is using Drupal 8. It means that we're going to be still working with features that are like impossible to revert. We're going to have multilingual systems that use 20 different modules. Yeah, you really do not want to be there still using Drupal 7 when everybody's switched to Drupal 8. So if I have one piece of advice, would be to get ready now. So we might not be building production websites now with Drupal 8, but we should start getting ready, because what is going to be the decisive point is not when the code is ready. It is when the people who work with the code are up to speed on the processes, on the concepts, on the understanding to really be ready. So get ready. Drupal 8, yes, it is awesome. It can do all these great things. But really, the goal is not to have awesome software. The goal is to use, well, Drupal 8 to make awesome things for real. Any questions? Yes?
Yeah, have you used Drupal 8 for what kind of projects so far? Or?
So we have looked at using Drupal 8. We have not used it in production. So we've considered it. There's some very special edge cases. For example, if you have there's one website that we're going to get started using it pretty soon, where it's just a backend. So you enter content and you serve that content with REST services. And for that, it's perfectly fine now. It's actually quite stable. But otherwise, yeah, no, there's a few things that need to be taken care of. Things like panels, like figuring out these issues with configuration management, having a beta that guarantees that we're going to have some kind of upgradability. And yeah, I think this is really the main criteria. So it depends what kind of site you're building, but for most professional sites, it is not ready at the moment. Yeah. Yes?
What about Drupal 8 for the backend purposes? You were saying that you're going to start a new project soon, but is that just because you're familiar with Drupal, or is that like really, what are the advantages of doing that with Drupal and not with some other existing best practice?
So you said using the same thing with Drupal 7, for example?
No,
or
using Drupal 8 for backend purposes only and using giving the data through RESTful API. Why not use something that's better for that purpose? Why Drupal 8?
So just to be clear, like an alternative would be like Rails or something that's really focused on like a REST server. Well, actually, Drupal 7 used to be pretty bad at this, because it was way too slow. Like doing a full bootstrap for every request, it doesn't work for a REST service. In Drupal 8, this is actually much better. So it is not as bad regarding the negative aspects, and you also get all the editorial tools that you have. So for the editor's interface, I know like many systems that are good at creating interfaces for APIs really, but if you want to create like an interface that lets you moderate content with using Rails or using Node.js or anything like that, it's going to take a huge amount of development. And these are all tools that you get for free. So it really depends what kind of data you want to enter. There's a lot of REST servers that all the data is entered using these services. So it really depends on what kind of use case you have. Yeah.
What about performance?
So performance is, it kind of goes up and down. There's been many situations where Drupal 8 was actually slower than Drupal 7. This is normal. It happens with every new version of Drupal, like especially during the development phase. There's more performance optimizations that are coming, especially regarding configuration management. Generally, what we see is that the default installation of Drupal might not be that performant, but it really makes it possible to have much better integration with memcache, external caching system, things like that, that really make it high scale. Yeah.
And the last question, what about performance versus Node.js or Ruby, or have you tried that?
I haven't done any direct comparison. I think, well, since you mentioned Node.js, I think it's interesting to. A lot of people say that Node.js is really fast. We've also done many projects involving Node.js, and there Node.js is actually not that fast. It is very good at concurrency, so it really depends what kind of job you need to get done. If you just need to build a proxy to pass information from one side to the other very quickly, Node.js is great at that, but yeah, it's not necessarily going to be faster per se. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.